Hello, I'm Hocking Hill's Granny, and if you've ever heard my story, The Whippoorwill and the Porch Swing, then you already know a little about my childhood and my porch memories. The story I'm about to tell goes back even further. It's about my grandfather and how he lost his little country store during the Great Depression, and what he did next to keep food on the table, not just for his own family, but for many families in the community. It's about quiet sacrifice and what it means to carry more than your share when times get tough. I hope you'll sit with me for a few minutes and let me tell it the way it was passed down to me. When the store went dark. When Grandpa talked about losing the store during the Great Depression, it wasn't the empty shelves or the unpaid tabs that stayed with him. It wasn't the silence after the bell above the door stopped ringing, or even the sound of the key turning in the lock for the final time. What he remembered was a 25-pound sack of flour. A man came in near dusk, quiet as a whisper, and asked if there was anything left. Grandpa reached behind the counter and handed the only thing left, a 25-pound bag of flour. The man slung it over his shoulder like it was salvation. We needed flour too, Grandpa later told my father, but that man had 11 children to feed. Dad's eyes narrowed when he told me the story, like he was seeing it through Grandpa's eyes. Walk 3 miles barefoot down that gravel road with that sack, back bent but not broken. That was the kind of man my grandfather was. He lost the store, but he kept his decency. He'd let anyone buy on credit, neighbors, friends, even wealthy folks from Logan. Some did it out of pride, not wanting anyone in town to know they were struggling. Others took advantage. They never paid Grandpa back, even after they recovered. He didn't hold a grudge against the local families, but the rich men, that stung, especially with worry about his own family's hunger. Still, he didn't complain. When the shelves were empty and the hope was thin, he went to the hillside and started digging. There'd always been coal buried deep under the land where my grandma was born. Most folks didn't have the tools or the grit to go after it, but Grandpa wasn't most folks. He gathered some of the out of work men, friends he once sold flour and nails to, and made an offer. If we dig it together, we burn it together. Nobody walks cold. So they dug, by hand, by lantern, in boots with holes and coats too thin for the wind. They took turns hauling out what they needed, making sure every family had warmth, even if their bellies stayed empty. Grandpa stood over 6 feet tall, but by the time I knew him, his back was permanently bent. Years of crawling through that low mine shaped his spine and his silence. He never complained, just tried to straighten up for photos, best he could. My daddy was just a boy then. One winter, his shoes gave out, split clean across the bottom. He stuffed them with newspaper, but by the time he got to school, his socks were soaked and his toes stung with cold. Then one day he noticed the miners' kids had new shoes, not fancy, but warm, laced, whole. He came home with icy, cold, wet feet and fire in his chest. Why do they get new shoes? He asked. You own the mine. Grandpa looked at him steady and soft. Because their daddies are down there every day. Without them, we don't have heat or supper. Grandma, standing by the stove, didn't even turn around. Don't feel sorry for not having shoes, she said, when there are men out there who don't have feet. Daddy never forgot that. It shaped how he stood up for workers the rest of his life. He never said how long he wore those busted shoes, But I think every time the paper shifted under his heel, he thought about that sack of flour, that barefoot man, and what quiet love looks like even when it only has little to give. They hauled that coal to Columbus by horse and buggy, through snow and slop, through dark hollers and winding roads. Grandpa made a deal with the Neal House, the Grand Hotel across from the State House. They said his coal burned hot and clean, and that's all that mattered. I remember one trip we made to Columbus when I was a kid. My aunt asked Dad to drive the old road. It was paved by then, but still narrow and winding. I remember staring out the window, imagining a horse and buggy inching along that ridge, coal in the back. Dad got to go on a few of those deliveries. His eyes lit up when he talked about them. Imagine that, Grandpa once said with a crooked smile. Coal from our hill, warming rooms where governors slept. Grandpa never bragged. That wasn't his way. He just loaded the wagon, hitched the horses, and got it done. And while Grandpa worked the hillside, Grandma had her own calling. She was a midwife, delivering babies in the middle of the night, horseback riding and sometimes walking miles to get to a mother in labor. Her hands knew what to do. Her presence made people feel safe. Now and then, she'd travel to work with the tribe. She never said much about it, but she always came back with a quiet strength and just enough money to surprise everyone. She carried more than babies into the world. She carried wisdom, resolve, grace. The mine ran until the war ended. My sister remembers hearing how Grandpa wrote the draft board, trying to get a miner exempt. He even predicted the day the war would end, and he was right. Afterward, he started a sawmill with his brother-in-law. My dad and his brothers worked there too. The way they talked about it, you could hear the relief in their voices. A much lighter chapter. The store, the mine, the porch, they weren't just places. They were the shape of our family's backbone. And maybe someday, someone we love will look back and say, because they did, we knew we could too. I'd be honored if you'd like, share, or subscribe. There's more to come, more about growing up in the Hocking Hills and the kind of people who shaped my heart. Thank you so much for staying.